From a fat, unhappy kid to a decent powerlifter, then back to a fat and unhappy adult, and then finally in middle age back into decent shape and decent strength. Find out why I went on that journey, how I achieved the results, and where I'm at now. Hi guys, welcome back. Some of you that have been watching this stuff on the channel since I started will know quite a bit of this, but I just wanted to do a video that kind of took us through the beginning right through to now of the fitness journey I've been on, how I achieved some of the results, why I went about doing this, and I will also give some diet info and stuff down in the description, so if you want to copy anything I've done, then I'll give you a breakdown of what I eat, and also in the description you'll find a simple breakdown of my training regimes, and there is also a lot of training stuff that you can find in one of the playlists. I think it's weight training playlist, and there is a load of stuff in the lifestyle playlist as well. Where did this all start? I was a fat child. The first memories I have being at primary school, I was always overweight. I had very, very generous parents, very loving parents, and probably a bit soft on me. And like all children, you know, I wanted to eat sweets and junk food and stuff. And there were a lot of my friends that were eating exactly the same things as me, but it just seemed that, you know, they got away with it and I didn't. And that's where genetics come in. And unfortunately, my genetics kind of predisposed me to easily put on body fat, and other people's genetics didn't. So we would all, you know, go down the tuck shop and have our 50p's in our pockets and buy the same amount of stuff. And it just so happened that I was the one that kind of put on a lot of weight. And, you know, kids being kids, I used to get teased pretty mercilessly about that at school, and wasn't a big deal, to be honest, coming from the boys. But one of the things that did kind of make it a big deal as I got older, I remember getting really upset about, you know, girls, and the situation that was basically girls were beginning to kind of select boys that they wanted to, you know, date, and people were asking each other out and stuff. And I was always the guy that the girls were like, oh, you know, you're my best friend, and I would get friend zoned, because at that age girls want to go out with someone who looks really, really hot and fit and lean and whatever, you know, all the sports guys and stuff. And fair enough, the boys were the same, you know, they wanted to go out with all the pretty trim looking girls and the petite girls. So, you know, no one's fault, that's just the way life is. But I took that pretty hard, I think, and that kind of affected me a little bit for a while, and that's what kick-started me into the fitness thing. And like a lot of people, you know, it takes kind of getting knocked down a few times and getting pretty low about yourself to kind of get some motivation. And my motivation came from, you know, being really sort of annoyed at myself of being in this situation, and that I had lacked any sort of motivation previously to do anything about it. I was, you know, into a particular girl at the time who wasn't into me, and I was taking that pretty hard, as teenage boys do. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do something about this. And part of me thought, oh, I'm gonna try and get this girl, but the reality was, you know, I just wanted to change things for the better, so that didn't happen again in the future, because I had no problems talking to girls, and I was a pretty funny guy. You know, I developed at school, probably to avoid being bullied too much. I developed a bit of a sense of humour, and I used to be a bit of a clown and mess about and do some sort of zany stuff and whatever. And so I had no issues, you know, with the social side of things. I was a good communicator, I was articulate, I was reasonably intelligent, so all those boxes were ticked. But the thing was no, no one wanted to date a guy that was massively overweight for his age. I started to take an interest in the gym. That seemed to me to be like a way to kind of alleviate some of the frustration I was feeling, do something about the body shape, and maybe meet some like-minded people, because even though I had seemingly quite a few friends, it gets pretty lonely when you've got some problems with yourself and you don't feel like maybe your other friends have the same problems, and it's not something you can easily share, especially as a young male. It's not easy to sort of tell your friends, oh, I feel really down about, the way I look, and I feel pretty bad about being overweight, and I'm kind of really upset with myself, and I've got some self-loathing kind of going on. That's pretty deep stuff for young boys to be talking about, and it just wasn't the done thing. So you would keep that to yourself. But I wanted a kind of outlet for all that emotion, and the gym provided that. So I plucked up the courage, went to a gym. I've always been someone that was very, very well researched. So before I went to the gym, I read up as much as possible. And I'm 47 now, so this is old school stuff that the internet was around at the time. It was in its infancy, and I was able to start having a look at some of the forums and the bulletin boards and stuff like that, and just picking up information on there, and watching stuff like the Arnold Schwarzenegger videos and the Dorian Yates training videos, Blood and Guts I think that was called, watching Ronnie Coleman. So all those kind of guys were having an influence, and I wasn't like a big into bodybuilding kind of kid. I didn't idolize those people, but I just saw that as a way to kind of utilize their knowledge, because these guys obviously know how to shed fat, and they obviously knew how to put on muscle. I realized that some of that would be enhanced, but whether or not it's enhanced, you can't take away from the fact that they had all the basics in hand. They obviously knew about diet, and they obviously knew about training and how to go about those things. So I was kind of mimicking them, and I made a lot of mistakes. The first time round, I went in there with like a 40 odd inch waist. I was really out of shape. I was probably, I don't know, like 30+% body fat, maybe 40% body fat. I was incredibly out of shape, had virtually no muscle, and I'd not really done much physical exercise myself, so I was weak. That was another reason, that you would get picked on, that you weren't kind of performing well on the sports field, or you weren't doing well in the gym. People would assume, oh, he's a big guy, he'll be really good at doing it, lifting weights or whatever, and I wasn't particularly. So I couldn't even fill that role of being, oh, he doesn't look great, but he's super strong. I wasn't either. It's tough, to walk into a gym and that you're right at the bottom of the stack. You're going to walk in there, there's going to be loads of really good looking people, there might be some pretty girls in there, and they're going to kind of look at you like, oh god, he looks awful, or that's what you think. I'm pretty sure that none of the girls even cared what I looked like, and they weren't paying any attention to me when I think back. But at the time, you think everyone's going to sort of turn around and look at you as you walk in the doors, like it's in a saloon in a Western film or something, and that all the guys are going to be kind of laughing because they've got these great physiques, and you're walking in and you don't look so good yourself. And I started doing this training, and I was doing a lot of cardio. So I was doing probably 45 minutes hard cardio every single day, 7 days a week, and I was just putting some headphones on. And one of the kind of tricks I was using, which you couldn't do now, but it was really popular back then, called the ECA stack, which was basically ephedrine, caffeine and aspirin, and no one really knew much about any of this stuff, and it was freely available. You could just buy supplements like in a normal supplement shop, order them online or whatever, and you could just get this ECA stack, or it would be in a powder that you could order. I think there was one called Agent Orange that we used to get, and I used to get this stuff, put on my music, and then do cardio, and man, it used to absolutely blow you away. It was like being at a rave. You felt these sort of energy rushes through your body. You felt really good, you felt really motivated, and of course, we learnt looking back that that was pretty much like doing amphetamine, but we didn't really know that at the time. What I do know is it helped burn a hell of a lot of body fat, and it gave me the motivation to do elongated cardio sessions, because I used to think, oh, I'll do half an hour, but then I'd kind of be so into the music, and it was almost like dancing when you're really enjoying the music, except you're on like a cross trainer or whatever. And I'd kind of be buzzing, you know, on this cross trainer and thinking, yeah, and looking at the calories and seeing them clock up. And I'd be like, well, this is great. I feel okay, you know. So sometimes I used to do an hour or more just because it felt awesome. So that was pretty cool. It probably was having some, you know, possibly negative effects on the cardiovascular system, because we know now ephedrine's banned. It's not a maybe a safe substance, but we used to use it all the time. Didn't even think about how much we were taking. We used to sort of take double the amount of pre-workout and whatever. No problem at all. But there we go. And I pretty quickly began shedding weight, because at the same time I'd started doing what we would now call, I guess, almost a keto diet. So I was very low carb. I was just eating a little bit of rice in one meal with some chicken. The rest of the meals were like chicken salads with a little bit of dressing on, because I'd kind of read up on, you know, cutting out a lot of carbs was a good way of dropping fat. And the Atkins diet was kind of going around at the time, but then there was also some information saying, you know, if you train and lift weights, you should have some carbohydrates. So I was trying to minimize carbs but still have enough that I could do a decent job with some weights. I was having porridge in the mornings with some protein powder thrown in there. I also used to throw like 3 eggs in there, cooked eggs, chopped up, which I wouldn't do now because it tasted disgusting. But Arnold Schwarzenegger was all about eggs, so I was chucking those in because I thought they were like the secret sauce. And like I say, all this stuff I was kind of finding out as going along. I didn't really have any hard data to go on. I just had all this sort of anecdotal stuff I was pulling off the internet. There wasn't, back in those days, a plethora of websites which would allow you to look at peer-reviewed studies and compare all these things. It was just like checking in on forums, and Big Dave 382 or whatever his name would be, you know, veteran of the forum, would give you some random advice and tell you what to do, and you would kind of follow it, and that was about it. So started lifting weights. I was hella weak to begin with, and as you would expect, but some of the guys in the weights room were actually real positive. It was a really cool gym. It was a hardcore gym I was training at, and some of the guys that at first looked, oh, they're really muscular and probably won't want to talk to me, they were like, oh man, you're doing really well, you know, we saw you come in, and you know, in a few months you've dropped loads of body fat. You know, they'd all noticed I was doing these machines for like 45 minutes to an hour on the cross trainers and whatever, which for them, they were doing like 10 or 15 minutes. So they were like, that's impressive. You know, no one likes doing cardio. So one of the first things I learned was that people in the gym will kind of notice when you're putting in the work, and that will give you a lot of respect. And I think that really encouraged me, because throughout my school time and being teased and then being disappointed with the girl situation and all that, having the you know, respectful comments off of guys that really looked in great shape and were a few years older than me, that really motivated me big time and made me feel really good about myself. So I started training with those guys and just copying them basically, and they would sort of give me some directions as to what to do. They were super helpful. A couple of them were actually competitive bodybuilders, so they knew their stuff. And I just continued to do what they were telling me to do, which was your basic Dorian Yates kind of training at the time. It was, you know, 3 or 4 hard sets to failure, and a pretty classic split of like 4-5 times a week, and splitting the muscle groups up. So you'd train legs one day, shoulders the next day, however it went. You know, you'd have a couple of days off and give yourself a rest period. That was one of the mistakes I was making at the time, was that I was so into this. Now I really enjoyed that lifestyle. I enjoyed being at the gym. I loved the guys down there. You know, I found it, the camaraderie and the good positive attitude, it was something I really enjoyed. So I would just go down there every day pretty much, and even if I didn't really need to train, I would sort of go down and just throw a bit of training in anyway, just because I wanted to be at the gym and I enjoyed the lifestyle. So that went on, and it probably took me 3 years, I would say, to get into decent shape. I managed to get myself into around 10 to 12% body fat, which I'd never ever been in my life. And I remember the first time that I was kind of looking at myself in the mirror in the gym, and I used to keep sort of checking my body. I was taking pictures. I wish I still had a lot of those pictures, but a lot of them are lost. I'll try and dig some out and throw them up during this. But the first time that I actually saw abs coming through, and I couldn't believe it, you know, that there was like visible abs there, because I'd been fat for so many years. And I never thought that I would ever be one of those guys that you could see abs, you know, and you could see like muscle definition, because we'd trained before as kids, right? You know, one of the guys that I hung about with when I was like 9 or 10 years old got one of these benches and weights, you know, the plastic weights and the really rickety benches from like an Argos catalogue or whatever. I think they could probably support about 50 kilos before they collapsed. And we used to go around to this kid's bedroom where we'd be lifting these weights, but we didn't have a clue what we were doing. But we all, you know, got disappointed after 2 or 3 weeks of doing it and thinking, well, this doesn't work, you know, that's not a thing. Where's this muscle that's supposed to develop? And we hadn't changed our diets or anything, and we were tiny kids, so like we didn't even have any testosterone. But that kind of stuck with me. So I thought, you know, the only people that developed really impressive physiques, bodybuilding type physiques or like fitness model type physiques, were people that had some kind of, you know, magic pills and enhancements and whatever. I didn't think that you could just achieve that through diet and training. And when I started to, you know, that was blowing my mind, and that just inspired me even more. So I was training super hard by this point, and I was probably benching, you know, 225 pounds, the US guys would say. But for us, you know, we were always looking like as young lads to do 2 plates a side. So it would be like a 100 kilo bench. And I remember getting that up. That was a big experience for me as well. You know, when I first got 100 kilos, I was pretty pleased with that. The bench is always like a set standard in the gym of pride and how you measure strength between people. You know, that's the first question people want to know is what are you benching? So I'm now into my sort of late teens, early 20s, and now I'm in pretty decent shape. And I managed to maintain that shape for a good few years. I started powerlifting, doing some comp stuff, and did a couple of bodybuilding shows as well. And I was slightly unusual that a lot of the powerlifters were these just really big guys that, you know, big at all costs and would eat donuts and stuff and just have really big guts. And I got into powerlifting kind of through bodybuilding training. I was watching guys like Ronnie Coleman and Dorian Yates, and specifically I was really loving the stuff that Branch Warren and Johnny Jackson were doing out in America. So I used to really enjoy watching their training videos, and they would train super heavy, super hardcore. And I think Johnny Jackson was an ex-powerlifter himself, and I thought, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a little bit of powerlifting but stay in really good shape. And I kind of quickly worked out that if I was competing against guys that were kind of really out of shape, they were strong guys, but they weren't carrying as much muscle into the weight class as they could have done. Because if you've got a really big beer gut, you know, that's not muscle. So I could go into that weight class with visible abs, and every little pound that I was carrying into it was basically lean mass, which is exactly what my strategy was. And I did really well because, you know, I'd go up against those guys. I was pulling, at my best, I was pulling about 300 kilos. I was squatting in the gym. I would squat 300 kilos plus, and I was benching 170s, 180s on a good day. Bench was never my strongest point, but that is some decent lifting. And I was weighing in, you know, I think I was sub 93 kilos at the time. So for my body weight, you know, they were pretty phenomenal lifts. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And what I really enjoyed was going in the gym, you know, like I looked a bit like a bodybuilder physique at the time. And then I'd kind of warm up with 100 kilos for bench and then just start banging out reps on 3 plates, and then, you know, stick another 10 aside on. And people just used to be like, wow, you know, what the hell's that guy doing? You know, they couldn't believe it. And I always kind of enjoyed that in the gym. You know, I wouldn't be doing ego lifting because I'd make sure I used decent form and my lifts were correct. But there's no doubt you get a buzz out of lifting some seriously heavy weights with good form at the gym, and people kind of notice and think, wow, that's awesome. So what happened from there? Well, I got out of shape because what in the end happened was from squatting all the time with really heavy weights, I picked up an injury in my back. In fact, 2 injuries, one from previous that I hadn't really realised was there, which was a compressed disc in the lower back, the lumbar region, and then I think it was the C4 right at the top, near the neck. I'd got a compression there and like a little calcified part there as well, where the squat bar had kind of worn the bone. Because obviously if you're sticking 300 kilos all balanced across your back, you know, it's going to press into something, and it was pressing on part of the spine and just wearing that away a little bit. But it was the compression of the disc that caused me the biggest problem, because that in the end caused me a nerve issue. The nerve issue ran down this arm, and then in the end I couldn't even lift like a kettle of water, you know, I couldn't even make a cup of tea with that arm. So I went from benching 170s to 180s. Overnight I couldn't even lift 5 kilos. So as you can imagine, I got pretty despondent. What I should have done was, you know, got some decent medical attention, concentrated hard, trained throughout afterwards, and just kept as much of my physique as I possibly could. What in effect happened was I got really down about it. You know, I was pretty upset. And I thought, oh, well, I'm getting older, you know, I'll kind of change things around. I'll start doing a bit of running, and I started doing a bit of fight training. I had a few fights like in MMA, boxing, kickboxing, that kind of thing. I wasn't particularly good at it because I had no kind of motivation to hurt my opponents. I was doing security work at the time, and I was really good at delivering pain to people that actually deserved it. But I just found that I had no inclination to kind of do that sort of thing in the ring, because I had utmost respect for the guys that were in there, and I just couldn't bring myself to kind of get angry enough to do anything. You know, I wasn't good enough technically to just rely on being a technician, and fight training just didn't bring me any joy. It was kind of fun for a little bit. It was good to do something different. It was good to work on some of my fight techniques. You know, they were useful for my work at the time, doing security stuff. But other than that, you know, it gave me a bit of self-confidence. But other than that, I didn't particularly enjoy the training. What I really wanted to do was lift weights. The injury was still bugging me, and that continued to bug me for about 3 years afterwards. And I kind of got out of the fight training, ended up getting a different job, moved house, moved to a different part of the country. When I moved, I actually did join a gym, and I started going there. The gym wasn't particularly like focused on weightlifting. It was more like a, you know, one of the commercial gyms that's kind of quite cardio orientated, and lots of like yoga wear, active ladies and all that kind of thing, which is fine, but I didn't find that particularly inspirational for me. And so I ended up going to that a few weeks, and I just started phasing it off, and then I just didn't go at all. And I kidded myself, you know, I was so engrossed in the work I was doing in the defence sector, which was, you know, good, interesting work and something I really enjoy. And I just sort of threw myself into that and kind of left the gym behind. Anyway, the next thing that happened was COVID. And that was kind of the worst thing in the world for me, because when COVID hit, we all kind of thought, oh, it's some sort of apocalypse or whatever. We were all in shock because the government was saying, everyone stay indoors, you know, don't go to work, and we'd never seen anything like this in our lives. So I think, like a lot of people, right at the beginning, we were like thinking the worst of, like, wow, this is like one of these films, these apocalyptic films you watch where, you know, the world's population is going to be decimated by this horrific virus. So I just stayed in, you know, I was eating all the wrong foods, drinking a lot of alcohol, and, you know, at the time you're thinking, well, I might as well have a drink and eat some really nice food every night, because who knows how long we're all going to be here. You know, I think a lot of people started thinking about their mortality at that point. It was kind of frightening times. And it took a good few months, I would say, for people to realise, oh, well, maybe this COVID thing isn't quite as bad as the governments have made out. You know, maybe we shouldn't all be locked in our houses. And we all started to have maybe a slightly different perspective on it. But obviously still a serious problem for the elderly and for people, you know, that were getting exposed to it, that had underlying health issues and whatever. And funnily enough, at the time, that would have been me, because I was massively overweight, I had high blood pressure, I was getting towards being, you know, pre-diabetic in my blood sugars. None of it was good. So I would have been one of the people that, had I caught COVID, it probably would not have done me any good at all, and I may have died from it, because I was absolutely out of shape. And that was probably another reason that I was quite wary about my mortality at the time. During COVID, you know, I just continued eating a load of junk, and by the end of the COVID lockdown, you know, when it was time to come back out of our houses again, I was actually ashamed of what I'd turned into. You know, I looked down, I'd kind of lost all the gains I'd made before. I'd put on loads of body fat. I was back up to a 40-inch waist, and maybe it was going just above 40, because even the 40-inch waist trousers I had were a little bit tight. And I looked like an absolute mess. My skin was really bad. I had this kind of weird rash, which I now think is probably linked to my immune function. But that kept coming back, so I was going to the doctors and getting like skin creams and stuff. None of them seemed to work particularly well. I was having a lot of effects that you would commonly relate to being diabetic. And like I say, I was pre-diabetic, but I didn't seem to have blood sugar levels that would indicate that I was actually in need of metformin or insulin or anything like that. But I certainly had a lot of the symptoms. I was feeling terrible. I was starting to feel really down about myself. I had no pride in my appearance, and I had no pride in anything I was doing, you know, because that knocked on to everything else. And when I finally had to go out again after being locked away for so long with the COVID situation, that all became a reality. You know, suddenly you've got to face the public again, and I didn't feel good about that. You know, I wasn't happy at all with what I was presenting. And I realised that, you know, when I looked in the mirror, if I found what I looked at pretty repulsive, then I knew that other people would be thinking the same thing as well. They might pay me lip service and be polite to my face, but they certainly wouldn't be liking what they were seeing. So I thought, yeah, it's time to make a change again. You know, it's time to make a big lifestyle change. So the first thing I did, I gave up alcohol, because alcohol is a source of endless terrible junk calories. It's not bringing any nutrients or vitamins to the body, and it's also absolutely sapping your willpower, because as soon as you've had a couple of beers, you're going to start wanting to eat pizzas and chips and whatever else, and you haven't got the willpower to say no at that point. I joined a gym, dug out some of my old diet plans, and started researching again, you know, what had changed on the diet scene, if there was any new information, anything worth adding or subtracting to the old diets I was using. So I set about making a brand new diet, counted all the calories out, and went through all the food groups, made sure everything was good there. And then I was training in the gym. I just joined a small local gym at the time, which was pretty handy, and I just replicated my old style of training, which I've tried a few different training methods in my life, and I know a lot of guys that train, and they've tried a few different training methods in their life, and the bottom line is, if you want to put on lean mass and you want to lose body fat, you know, there's very simple, efficient ways to do that. And you certainly don't need to do all this like crazy training, balancing on boards, wiggling your arms around, and all the weird exercises that you see online these days, and TikTokers, you know, showing people having like bands everywhere and doing all this crazy stuff in the gym. You honestly don't need to do any of that. You just need to really stress your muscles, lifting decently heavy, pretty much to failure. And there's a few basic lifts that you can incorporate that are going to get you there. So I was just going back to that training, back to the good diet, and this time, because I had all that dialed in and I didn't have a learning experience to go through, so I went from a 40-inch waist then to a 30-inch waist in 12 months. And I remember telling a few people I knew, you know, a lot of these people had never seen me in good shape. You know, that some of my work colleagues and stuff had only ever seen me out of shape. And I said to them, you know, in 12 months I'll have abs. It'll be like I'll be sort of fitness model body, except I'm 47, so obviously I don't look like a fitness model anymore, but I will have, you know, the muscle tone and abs and stuff that you would expect a fitness model to have. And they were like, yeah, you know, they didn't kind of believe me. And to be honest, I absolutely love that motivation. You know, I love it when people like doubt what I'm saying. If you want me to do something, the best thing is to like bet on me not to do it. So if you say, I don't believe you could run a marathon or whatever, you can bet on me not to do it, and I'll try and prove you wrong, and I'll die trying, because I hate people kind of telling me what to do, and I really don't like it when people don't think I'm a man of my word. If I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. And if people doubt that, you know, I like to show that I did do it. So again, this time I didn't go so crazy on the exercise. You know, I was just doing half an hour cardio. I ramped the cardio up, which if you look at some of my diet and exercise videos, it will talk about how to kind of get around the problem of homeostasis, where the body just wants to remain the same, so it starts adjusting its metabolism and stuff. There's things you can do with diet and cardio that will actually stave that off and keep you in a fat burning mode. So I was doing this kind of staged approach, but I only ever got up to about half an hour cardio a day. Oh, at one point I was doing half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, but that was probably like 4 days out of 7 a week, and then I was doing 5 lifting sessions a week as well. So a fair amount of exercise, and I've had people say, oh, I can never dedicate that much time, you know, that's way too much time to dedicate. But they're out of shape, they're not happy, but they're still okay to dedicate 4 or 5 hours of an evening watching Britain's Got Talent, going on Facebook, looking at other people's Instagrams, wishing they looked like the person they were looking at on Instagram. I'm like, well, just half the time that you're spending on social media or in front of the TV absorbing a load of rubbish, and actually utilize that to get into the shape so you can start your own Instagram and, you know, wow people with your own physique. Like, it's not rocket science. So if you're like thinking, oh, I can't dedicate the time, have a really realistic thought with yourself, like how much time are you actually spending per day doing absolutely nothing, you know, sitting around procrastinating, looking at social media or whatever, and utilize that time for doing something decent. That's all I did. You know, I was just not partaking in some of the more vapid sort of hobbies that I had, you know, sitting around doing nothing, messing about on computers or whatever. If you're not actually doing any productive work, then that's time you could be doing something productive and going to the gym. So this time it took me 12 months, and I did manage to get visible abs in 12 months. In fact, even sooner than that, I think I got them in about 8. You know, I cut down to a 30-inch waist, and that was just, like I said, gym, cardio and diet. And now I'm still in that shape, still got a 30-inch waist, still got visible abs, still going to the gym. Now I'm trying to work and build my strength up again. I got the bench up to 140, 150 actually was my best bench so far. That was a week ago, I think. And then I'm pulling 200 on the deads. I've tried squatting that's not so good for me, so I have to do like pendulum squats, hack squats and stuff like that, which I don't really bother counting how much I've got on there, because it's not a fair comparison between people that are squatting to people that are using machine squats. When I did have a go at squatting, I can still squat about 200 kilos, but I pay for it because straight away it starts pinching on that bit on my back, and then straight away I can start feeling weakness in this arm. So it's just not worth the risk of going back and having that old injury come back and the really weak arm, because then I won't be able to bench, won't be able to deadlift, I won't be able to do anything, and I would be afraid of getting back out of shape again. And what are the end results of all that for me? Apart from the aesthetic, it was night and day. You know, I felt so much better about myself. I felt so much more productive at work because I was more gregarious. I was going out and meeting customers. The customers were treating me differently because suddenly I looked like a different type of person. So I found that they were more engaged to talk to me. They were more willing to listen to what I had to say. I work in the defence industry, which is obviously full of pretty sort of hench looking guys, you know, big guys, and I'm talking to a lot of military and police and stuff like that, and they're not going to be particularly respectful of someone that's dreadfully physically unfit, who's just lazy, because, you know, they all spend a lot of time, you know, getting fit and working on their endurance and stuff like that. So I actually found it a positive benefit. And then just the feeling I had about myself, I felt so much happier. And I'd forgotten how happy I was, you know, and then how unhappy I'd become when I got out of shape. And you take these things for granted so easily in a couple of years of being in good shape again. You know, you sort of forget how good that feels, but you have to compare it if you try and remember how bad it feels to be out of shape. And I remember even when I was out of shape, I had like a dream one night that I was back in shape, and I was at the gym. And I woke up from this dream and I looked down at myself and I was a mess, you know, still fat and whatever. And I was so disappointed, you know, and I felt so good in the dream because it was one of those dreams where it feels almost real. And I just felt so amazing in this dream and like so pleased with myself. And then that stark difference between those two of waking back up and that immediate disappointment when I looked down, you know, I was so sad. And that sums it up to me of the night and day difference I feel between when I'm working hard, physically exercising, and when I'm lazing around and eating a bunch of junk. So I will never fall off that wagon again if I can help it. You know, hopefully, God forbid, that nothing really seriously bad happens to me and prevents me from training. But I certainly don't aim to stop training through my own volition, let's put it that way. So is this the thing anyone can do? Simple answer, yes. Anyone can do this. You know, if you're into doing your research, and I think I did a video a couple of days back about how to pick a good strategy if you're going to choose an influencer or whatever, someone to take the strategy from, like how may be best to select that. But even if that's not you and you're not into social media or whatever, you can always look around online, find some pretty decent information. Nowadays you can even compare it on the, you know, the medical sites and the nutritional sites. There's PubMeds and stuff with loads and loads of published peer-reviewed science on there that you can cross-reference. And if that's you, if you're into your research, then you can easily put this together yourself and kind of come to your own conclusions. If not, then just pillage the work of someone that you trust. If you are interested, you can join with me as a member. It's £2 a month, and honestly, you know, I'm only charging that because it's like the minimum fee I can do for membership, and I have to kind of cover the cost somehow. I'm not someone who's here to, you know, try and make millions of pounds out of the fitness industry. I just want to try and give a bit back, and if I can make it kind of pay for my time at the same time, which it isn't paying for my time at the moment, but hopefully we'll get to a point where it is. Talking of which, please subscribe if you're watching. It's much appreciated. I really need the subscribers because every little bit helps. So you can get from me a full diet plan and a full exercise plan. There's exercise videos that I've got that you can watch. I'll put links down in the description. And the same with the diet. There's a very simplistic diet plan that I'll stick in the description, and a simplistic exercise plan that I'll stick in this description as well, so you guys can follow that. If you want to know how to tweak that for your own benefit and to modify it so that it suits your body type and it suits your weight and whatever, or your desired weight, then please do join as a member, even if you only join for a couple of months, and just glean the information that way and then give it up, no problem at all. And I appreciate anyone joining. If you do join as a member, I will respond to any emails you send. If you've got any questions about any of this stuff, I'm more than happy to help you out. And even if you've got any, just want to chat about how you're feeling and where you think you could go, where you can get some motivation from, I'll talk to you about that as well, because I've certainly been there and done it in that regard. Thanks a lot, guys. I hope that sheds some light on, the journey I've been on, why I've been on it. Any questions, stick them in the comments. Please do comment on this one. I'd like this video to get pretty popular if I can, because like I said, we want as many subscribers as possible. The more I get, the more I can start getting out and about and actually filming some content in different locations, maybe go to a couple of fitness expos and whatever, interview some interesting people. So it will all be used for the greater good, and everything I'm trying to bring you is all from the heart. It's truthful. I'm not here as like some sort of sponsored athlete trying to ram some supplements down your throat. I'm literally just here trying to get the truth out to people. Thanks a lot. Have a great week. See you all soon.